Start in Frosty Editor. Navigate to the correct folder by going to Content, then Broadcast Graphics, then Components, followed by Monolith, and then Team Logos. Here you will find the files related to the mesh logos. The file you will need to export is the skinned mesh object. Scroll through the files until you find the logo you want to modify. Once you find it, you can double-click the file to bring up a preview of the mesh. Next, click on Export, and in the Mesh Export settings, make sure the proper skeleton is selected. This can be found by navigating to Temp Shared Data, Characters, Objects, Common, and finally selecting the Prop Rig skeleton. Before exporting, make sure your scale is in centimeters and that Flatten Hierarchy is selected. Next, click Export and save the file to your PC. Next, open Photoshop and load your logo file. To begin, first duplicate the base layer of your logo and then toggle visibility off. We'll be returning to this layer soon. Next, use the Magic Wand tool to select each segment of your logo. Make sure the contiguous option is unchecked so that you will select all of each color when using the tool. First, select any white segment of your logo, then go to Edit and Cut. You'll see later that the white elements of the mesh logo will all come from one background layer. Next, select each color in your logo using the Magic Wand tool. In this example, we only have two, red and blue. Once you select the first color, click on Edit and Cut. This time, however, once you've done this, go back to Edit and choose Paste Special, and then Paste in Place. Your cut selection will be pasted as a new layer. Repeat this step for each color in your logo. Here, since we only have two colors, I only need to do it once, because when I cut the red out, all that remains is the blue. Next, click on the layer you created when you first opened Photoshop and toggle visibility on. Double-click on the layer and click on Color Overlay. The color you choose doesn't matter, but I recommend red or black. Next, right-click and copy this layer style and paste it to the other layers you have created. Next, toggle visibility off of every layer besides the bottom layer. Now go to File, Save As, and save this as a PNG file. Return to the layers, and this time, delete the layer you just saved. Now, toggle visibility on for the next layer and save it as a separate PNG file. Repeat this step for each layer until you save them all. For the next step, open a new document in Inkscape. Click on File and import each of the files you saved in the previous step. Next, open Trace Bitmap and make sure Single Scan is selected, and that detection mode is set to Brightness Cutoff. The settings as shown should work on most logos. Make sure the top layer image you imported is selected, and click on Apply to trace the image. Repeat this step for all other images. Once done, go to the Layers menu and delete each of the original images from the document. Once this is done, click on File and save a copy. Make sure the format is set to SVG and save the file. Now open Blender and start a new document. Before you get started, select the default objects and press Delete to clear them. Now click on File and Import and FBX. And select the original mesh file you exported from Frosty Editor earlier. It's likely you won't be able to see the mesh initially because it is too small. You will need to use your mouse scroll wheel to zoom into the object until it becomes visible. use the controls to the right to view the logo from the front. To make it easier on yourself, it's probably best to use your mouse scroll bar to zoom out a bit to give yourself more room. Next, click on File and Import and the SVG option. Choose the SVG file you saved in Inkscape earlier. You likely won't see your logo at this point, because it is flat and not oriented the same way as the original. To rotate the SVG logo, select a wide area to the left of the original mesh, or right-click on the SV collection to the right to select the objects. Next, press the S button on your keyboard to scale the SV logo to the correct size. For the moment, just make it a bit smaller so you can rotate it without it taking up too much space. Next, press R to rotate the logo and Y to do so on the Y-axis. At this point, you can rotate the SVG logo by moving your mouse. Blender will display the rotation above the toolbar to the left. You need to rotate the logo to 90 degrees or as close as you can get to it. There is probably a way to do this easier than I am, but as I said, I'm still learning Blender, so I'm not sure. Once you rotate your logo on the Y-axis, repeat the previous process for the X-axis until the logo is oriented the same way as the original Madden mesh. Next, you will want to resize your logo to roughly match the original. I generally use the bottom of the original as a floor for mine, and try not to exceed the height of the original too much, but this can vary depending on the shape of each logo. Now, in the Collections menu to the right, expand the object called Reference to see all the pieces of the original logo, and for the moment, toggle their visibility to off. Next, do the same with the pieces of your SVG logo, and then one at a time, toggle the viability back on and select the piece. Then click on the Materials icon in the menu to the bottom right of the screen. Here you will add color to your mesh. This step is not required as the colors you choose here won't be recognized by the game, but I highly recommend doing this anyway, because it does make your experience in Blender a lot easier. Click on the base color box and choose the color you want. I usually go with something close to the color I'm going to use, but any colors will do, as long as you can differentiate between them in Blender. Repeat this process with each piece of your logo. Once you have done this for all pieces of your logo, switch to viewport shading by clicking the second to last icon in the box as seen in the video. Now, for some reason, my imported images have distortion in Blender on the computer I'm using to make this video. This isn't the case on my other PC. And as far as I can tell, this does not affect the actual final product. So I'm not too worried about it. But if you are, I'm sure there's a fix for this out there somewhere. But right now, it's not something that bothers me a whole lot. Next, you will need to extrude each one of your pieces by 0.002. To do this, click on the Object Data Properties icon on the menu to the bottom right, and then click on the Geometry tab. Enter 0.02 in the Extrude box, and repeat this step for each piece of your logo. You can now convert your SVG pieces to mesh by selecting all of them, and then in the workspace, right, clicking on the objects, and choosing Convert to, and then Mesh. You'll notice the icons beside your pieces will change. At this point, you will want to rename each piece of your logo to a corresponding piece of the original. In this example, the Bills logo has pieces named Red Jersey, Blue Jersey, and White Jersey. There are also light objects, but those aren't something I've completely figured out yet, and for the moment, I'm sticking with the basic colors. In this example, the colors of my logo and the original match up perfectly, but that won't always, or even often, be the case, so you may want to take note of what color names correspond to the colors you'll need for your logo for when you import it back into the game. In this case, I'm renaming my logo pieces based on their actual colors of white, blue, and red. The formatting of the names is important and should match the original names except for the part after the colon, which in your pieces should be LOD0.00. Once you have renamed all your pieces, it's time to transfer the mesh data from the originals to yours. To do this, click on one of your pieces and then click the Object Data Properties icon on the menu to the bottom right and choose Mesh Data Transfer. Click on the source box and choose the original mesh piece that most closely resembles yours. In reality, any of the non-light pieces should work fine in this step. Once you choose your source, click on UV Set, and then the Transfer Mesh Data button. Once that is done, click on the Vertex Group button, and again, click on Transfer Mesh Data. Repeat this step for each one of your pieces. Next, use the controls to the right to view your logo from the side. Here you will move every piece except the backing piece, in this case the white piece, slightly to the left so that it will extrude in the final mesh. Alternatively, you can just add a higher extrude number in the earlier step, but I find this method gives you more control over the final product. Now hold down the Control key and select each piece of your logo, and then also select the orange reference item in the menu to the top right of the screen. Once all items are selected, press Control P and choose Armature Deform. This will parent the skeleton to your mesh items. Next, hold down Control and select each of the original mesh pieces and delete them. Make sure to keep the orange reference item and the green pose and reference options. Now, again, hold down Control and select your mesh items and drag them up into the same collection as the orange reference item. Once you do this, you can safely delete the SVG collection item in the menu. Your logo should be ready to export now. Drag your mouse to select everything or simply press the A key. Now go to File and Export and choose FBX. I have the export settings saved, but you will need to copy the settings seen here. Once you have entered the settings, you can click the Export button to save the mesh file. Next, go back to Frosty Editor and make sure you still have the original mesh selected. Click on Import and choose the file you just exported from Blender. The preview screen should update with your mesh. The final step is to modify any colors needed for your logo and update the mesh variation DB file in Frosty. First, navigate to the Broadcast Graphics folder in Frosty, then to the Textures folder, and finally the Team Logos folder. Here you will see each team logo mesh has a separate file for each color. To find the ones you need to modify, use the name of your mesh pieces as a guide. For example, I use the Bills logo, which has red, white, and blue, so I'll need to export those pieces to be modded in Photoshop. Keep in mind the game uses one white and one black file for every team, so no need to do those. When exporting your colors, make sure you use DDS format. Otherwise, they will not work properly. Once you have exported your color textures, open them in Photoshop along with your original logo file from earlier. Use the eyedropper tool to sample the colors of your logo, and then the paint bucket tool to fill the exported texture with your new color. Once you're done, save the DDS file. Make sure you select the compression option for BC3 7BP RGB as shown. Next, return to Frosty Editor and import the modded texture files you just saved. You will need to choose DDS in the file format drop-down menu to be able to select them. In the event that you need to add a color, you can right-click on one of the textures and select Duplicate. Name the new texture anything you want and choose Save. I don't need one here, and so this is just an example. Double-check that your new color has been added to the bundle by clicking View and opening the bundle editor. Choose Blueprint Bundles from the drop-down menu and scroll down to locate the monolith entries. Click on your team and navigate to the Textures folder, and you should see your new color. If not, you can select the new texture and click on Add to Bundle. Next, return to the Mesh Logo folder by going to Content, then Broadcast Graphics, then Components, followed by Monolith, and then Team Logos. Locate your modded mesh and click on it, then click on the References tab and locate the Mesh Variation DB file, and double-click to open it. Here you can navigate through the materials contained in your mesh and replace the existing colors if need be. Note that in my case, I don't need to make any changes here, because by modding the color textures that are already referenced, the new mesh should be colored correctly, as long as I imported the modded textures to the correct place. But if you need to switch out an existing color texture with another one, you can do so by expanding the entries until you see the Texture Parameters tab. Find the entry that points to an existing color texture, then navigate back to the Team Logos texture folder and select the one you want. With this selected, simply click on the arrow in the Texture Parameters tab of the Mesh Variation DB file, and it should insert your selected texture. Note that the entries using the video board shader are the light entries. After this, you should be done. Just export your mod, and you should see your new mesh in the game.